Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Pappas Post Facebook page. I am thrilled to be back with all of you. Did take a brief hiatus over the summer. I am in the kitchen of MoMA PS1, this wonderful museum in New York City with none other than Mina Stone. We are at Mina's Café, a wonderful new Greek Mediterranean restaurant with this chef extraordinaire who's just published this amazing new cookbook, Lemon, Love, and Olive Oil. She's going to tell us all about it. I want to talk to you first about Mina because she's somebody very special, and I've known her for many years. We've hung out in diners in Brooklyn. She published her first cookbook called Cooking for Artists, which is available at Amazon, but you got to get it quickly because it's going to go out of print pretty soon. Little secret she told me. Mina, welcome. Welcome to
Hi.
Live with Gregory Pappas, my wonderful Facebook Live show. I want to talk to you about how you got started. I read in an article in Vogue that you kind of stumbled across cooking. You were a fashion designer. You had your own eponymous label of clothing. How did we go from fashion to food?
Well, I went to art school. I moved to New York to go to Pratt Institute and study fashion. It was my dream since I was a little kid.
Where were you born?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, Cleveland. A lot of people from Cleveland watching.
Yeah, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and then we actually moved back to Greece when I was a kid. I went to pre-K and kindergarten there, and then we moved to Boston so my dad could finish his studies, and I grew up in Boston. And when I moved to Brooklyn, I really wanted to be a fashion designer, and I knew I don't know, sometimes we know things. I knew I didn't want to ever work for somebody else in the fashion world.
Typical Greek.
Is that okay? Yeah.
We're all entrepreneurs.
So when I graduated, I started my own line, and I needed to also support myself financially because for a lot of people in fashion, we know it is a very tough business. And so I always loved to cook. I was always around my yaya, who was an amazing cook and did it extremely intuitively. And I started cooking as supplemental income. As time passed, I was cooking all the time. I was doing my line, and I met somebody in the art world that said, "Hey, do you want to cook dinner for 40 people at this gallery?" And I said, "No, that's way too many people." And then I thought about it, and I was like, "Oh, well, let me give it a try." And then that basically kicked off the story.
So I read in the article in Vogue
Yeah.
that the way you did it is you took a recipe, you selected recipes from a book, and then you just multiplied the ingredients by 10 or something like that because the
Exactly.
recipe called
Yep.
for 4 servings. So you're like, okay, 4 times 10 is 40, cooking for 40.
That's what I did. That's
So
exactly
trial by
what I
error.
did. Yeah, it was definitely trial by error. I think it was that sort of joy of when you're young and you're kind of like, I'll do anything. And then you're not really scared of failing. And so that's how it started.
So that was an art gallery in New York, and that kind of created a niche for you because you became the chef for the best art galleries in New York City. And
Yeah.
art and food kind of really went along well, didn't it?
Yeah. I've thought about the reasons why I think this sort of continued in the way that it did because I didn't go to culinary school. I have never worked in a restaurant until I opened my own. And it was through this gallery I was cooking for that I met an artist named Urs Fischer, and then I started cooking at his studio for close to 10 years. And he had the idea of publishing the first book, Cooking for Artists, together, and we made that book together. I think the relationship between art and cooking, for me, isn't necessarily about the physical art. It's more that artists gave me a lot of freedom to tap into whatever I found interesting about food. Nobody was like, Mina, can you make this for us today? It was like, here's your studio, the kitchen.
Your palette.
Yeah, and you know, kind of create what is speaking to you.
Start drawing.
And that, I think, is what's been, that's something I'm really grateful for.
So what excites me about what you do, and I've often told you this, I've been to many art galleries and openings, and I've seen this book on tables at mainstream American art galleries. And you know, you've got lines waiting out the door of all these famous artists and all these openings. And this book is everywhere. And you know, you look through it and you got fasolakia in here. I mean, my yaya made fasolakia. My mom made fasolakia. So you're sharing so many wonderful aspects of our Greek culinary heritage with a mainstream American audience. And I think that's what you're doing here at MoMA PS1, at Mina's, which I'm so excited about too, because this is a mainstream art institution known globally, and people come here to see the top artists of the world on display in the heart of New York City. And here they are in this wonderful Greek restaurant, packed with a lot of Greek love, a Greek chef, Greek wine, Greek olive oil, and Greek food. But not everything you do is Greek. It's your Greekness inspires what you do. You do a lot of things I've noticed in the new book, some Syrian things, some things from other cultures. Do you think we're all linked in that part of the world? I mean, culinary wise?
You know, when I've been asked, it's very hard because people are like, Mina, you have a Greek restaurant. And I do have a Greek restaurant, but then I also I'm Greek. I'm also Jewish. I'm also grew up in Boston and New York. So it is not the only thing that is a part of who I am. But it's interesting because it's kind of this like touchstone. And I go to the Middle East a lot for inspiration. I'm not totally sure why, but I find that when I'm in Greece as well, I feel much closer to the Middle East than I do to Europe. And that certainly has a lot to do with our history and food pathways through Iran and Turkey and Syria and all those places that have influenced Greek food and vice versa. So, yeah.
So we're gonna cook something for you today, but we're kind of gonna do the fast version because these bad boys take, according to Mina's recipe, about 4 hours to make. And I think in the introduction to the recipe, Mina, I read that that's actually the secret. You can't fast cook these. They need to be slow cooked so that all the flavors mix. So we'll talk about that. You want to get started? Tell us what you need.
Sure.
Looks like some simple ingredients. We are making revithia sto furno, chickpeas in the oven, classic Greek comfort food. One of my favorites. I often argue between fakes and revithia, but revithia usually wins. So talk to us about this dish.
Okay, I learned how to make this dish in Paros, and the Cycladic Islands traditionally cultivated chickpeas. And there's one farm in Paros where you can still get chickpeas. It's really cool. I love to get them there. But the women of the village would take their chickpeas in a traditional clay pot, and they would take them to the wood burning oven on Saturdays, and they would put them in the wood burning oven, and they would cook all through the night until the next day after church they would come and get them, and so they had slow cooked forever. They still have this festival in Paros every year called the Chickpea Festival, which is where I learned how to make these. And I was like, how is it possible that 3 ingredients make the most delicious food? But that to me is also the essence of Greek food, is very, very simple cooking with kind of massive payoff. So, okay, so I soak these chickpeas overnight, and then I drain them and I rinse them well.
So soaking them is critical to this process.
Soaking them is critical.
You can't cheat.
Can't cheat.
What about canned versus, do you use canned chickpeas or is that a no-no?
That's a no-no.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you can use canned chickpeas, but the flavor is not the same because while this is cooking, the dried chickpea gives off flavor into the broth and makes the broth extremely flavorful. And that is the secret to why they are so extremely good. Canned chickpeas can work in a pinch. They just won't be as tasty.
Well, I just tasted one, and there's a lot of really cool woody flavors almost in there, right?
The chickpea,
and they definitely don't taste like the kind out of the can when I do cheat and use canned chickpeas.
Yes,
the canned
agreed.
ones are kind of bland.
Absolutely. Now, for the onion, in my book, I have it sliced up, but you can slice up the onion however you want. The idea is that this onion dissolves in the chickpeas because you're cooking it for 4 hours, and it kind of creates this thickening agent for the broth, and it makes the broth a little thicker. So for me, I'm just gonna cut them up coarsely.
Are these on the menu at Mina's?
They're gonna be.
They're gonna be.
Yes. This is next on our menu. Okay. Then, Greg, you mentioned this earlier, always use rosemary as well for the chickpeas that are kind of like the soup or the stew that my grandmother made. When I was in Paros, there was nothing in the chickpeas. There was no rosemary. And I was kind of really into how absolutely simple they were. So I just add a couple of bay leaves to flavor the broth that then I take out, because it was I don't know, it was really just this bowl of chickpeas with olive oil. That's what it looked like. And love
So
it.
I was telling Mina earlier, when I make my revitada, I always use rosemary. Fresh rosemary is always a staple to this dish. And then, of course, my mother used to thicken it at the end she sometimes cheated and used flour.
Yep.
And she would mix flour, a little bit of lemon juice, and broth.
Yep.
But then toward the end of her life, when she was doing different things, she would actually take a cup of chickpeas and mash them up and with the lemon juice and thicken it that way. So she stopped using flour.
Yeah.
What are we doing with these?
So with these, what's going to thicken this is the onions breaking down.
Really?
Yeah, that's what thickens it. That's what's really cool about it. The onions breaking down create this kind of really sort of jelly-ish broth. That's the best way I can explain it. And that's it. But it's true. Every Greek woman has a different way of thickening something.
So
my grandmother would put a handful of rice. You could also do that.
Rice? Ah, interesting.
So at the end, in the last 30 minutes of cooking, she put a handful of rice in there, and it would kind of, you know how risotto kind of gives off that creamy starch that thickens it? That's what she would do. And you can do that too.
So this is really, it's almost shocking that you've literally used 3 ingredients, and something that's going to come out of the oven in 4 hours is going to taste so good.
I swear.
Is the simplicity of Greek food something that you enjoy working with, or do you prefer more complex flavors?
No. Oh, no. I enjoy the simplicity of Greek food. I think that the truth is that simple food is much harder because there's nothing to disguise anything under. It really takes, to make simple food delicious, and this shouldn't be intimidating in any way, but I feel like you have to season it just right. You know, you have to know how to put the lemon juice and the olive oil and the salt on so that it's enough so somebody tastes it and is delicious. I mean, it's part of the reason why I named the book that, because it became a joke, because people would be like, Mina, why does this taste really good? And I would be like, well, it's just lemon juice and olive oil. And so,
and 4 hours in the oven.
And 4 hours in the oven. But even if it was something else, you know, it's like if you can learn how to season something, you can make something very simple taste really delicious. And I think that is definitely at the core of a lot of Greek cooking anyway.
So we have signed copies. Mina actually sat all morning and signed a whole box of these. These are a great Christmas present if you want to send something for your loved one. Lots of great recipes, wonderful food photography. Tell me about the food photography. These are art. These are beautiful photographs.
Oh, thank you. My friend, who's an artist, she's not a photographer, but she's an artist.
Really?
She takes photographs too, but she took all the pictures in the book. Her name is Cassandra McLeod, and yeah, she's amazing.
So we have signed copies. We're going to put a link in the post for you to order signed copies through the Greek America Foundation. You make a charitable donation and we send you a signed copy as a gift. Mina spent all morning signing. So how are we finishing off our revitada?
Okay, so we're gonna put in enough water
To cover.
to cover, and a little more. I would put in like an inch more for this purpose so we don't waste time. But I would give it, you know, because it's in the oven for 4 hours, you actually do want to have enough water so that it has all that time to get super soft. And then you're gonna put salt.
Greek sea salt, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I like to cook with kosher salt actually,
Kosher salt.
because it's less salty and gives you more control.
Okay, good.
So that's
There's a tip
That's
from
a tip.
Mina Stone's kitchen.
Yeah.
Mina is Asimina, correct?
Yeah.
Is that your yaya's name also?
It is my yaya's name.
Very typically Greek,
Yes.
named after yaya.
Yes. Yeah. And I learned so much from her, so we were kindred spirits for sure. Anyway, and then I'm going to finish it with some of this beautiful olive oil
Hey,
that you
looks
make in
very
Crete.
familiar.
This stuff is incredible.
Thank you.
And I will say that I'm only going to put, and in general, but especially with like such a high quality olive oil, and this is something I learned from my yaya, which I think is interesting because she was before kind of a lot of the health information that we have these days, but she always told me use a little bit when you're cooking and then put a lot more olive oil in when the dish is finished cooking so that you get the olive oil as raw as possible.
And that's
So-
actually the secret to
Yeah.
this particular olive oil,
Yes.
because I've been studying olive oil since I started this brand. Why this olive oil tastes so different, which you commented last year when you tried it, it's peppery. You actually almost gag when it goes down your throat. That peppery feeling is something called polyphenols, and polyphenols are only found in unripe olives. So the more the olive ripens, the less the polyphenols stick in the olive, right? So the unripe olives create this peppery feeling,
Yeah.
but it's the polyphenols that are they're anti-inflammatory. I mean, they give you so many benefits. There have been numerous studies, anti-inflammatory. We just published an article on the Pappas Post last week that 2 tablespoons of early harvest high phenolic olive oil a day is better than ibuprofen. The
Wow.
anti-inflammatory
Really?
qualities. And there's so many medical studies. So yeah, this is my olive oil, and Mina tried it last year and she was gracious enough to beg me for more. So here we are.
And I drank it with the spoon.
Yep.
I mean, anyway,
Every
just
morning,
a
2
little bit.
tablespoons.
really just a little bit, because then you're gonna put a lot more when this is done.
So covering it is critical, creating this kind of crock pot,
Yep.
keeping the steam in.
And now in Greece, you make this with, you usually make it in like a clay pot. But I am also really into just using what you have on hand. You know, I feel like you should really, so anything works. You can use like a Dutch oven, you can use a Pyrex with tin foil on it. Here at the restaurant, this is what we have, and this works just as well. Anything will work that's covered. Then I stick them in the oven. So you can smell these other guys.
So 4 hours in the oven, how hot?
4 hours in the oven at 350. And I have these, and this is like maybe an hour in. I tried to start them in the morning, but let's check them out.
So are we allowed to open this up and check it out along the way, or do we
You are.
want to keep it?
After 2 hours, open it up, check it out. It's really hard to mess up this dish because you want to check it.
Oh
like,
my God,
see-
the smell.
Yeah.
Wow.
You
Wow,
want to
wow,
check
wow.
it, you want to make sure it has enough water. And then this, and this is the last thing I'll say, is like they're already soft and these are just going to keep cooking and absorb the water. So you're gonna be left with this sort of thick broth, and the onions will dissolve, and then maybe you get like some caramelly chickpeas around the edge, and you're done.
I can't, I wish I could describe the smell to you guys. It's actually, it's remarkable. So that's the secret is the 4-hour process. It's getting all the flavors in.
Yeah, it's a 4-hour process, but honestly, sometimes I've been in a rush and I had to crank that last hour, and I put the oven up to 400, and you can also, just check it. It's kind of this balance of like understanding what's going on. Like, is the water evaporating? Are the chickpeas getting soft? And like, as you do it, you'll get to know that process, and then you can experiment.
So I wish I could share this with all of you. I can't. I'm going to sit down and have some lunch right now. Thank you, Mina. We are at Mina's restaurant in MoMA PS1. It's literally 2 train stops away from Midtown Manhattan. You have to come and try this place. I'm looking at wonderful Greek wine on the shelf, great Greek menu items, but not only, other Greek inspired and other Mediterranean things too. Thank you all for watching. Remember, we have signed copies of Lemon, Love, and Olive Oil available. The link will be in the post. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Mina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I would love to come back, and maybe we can do some fun cooking classes here, or some dinners or some brunches where you can kind of share your vision. So
Absolutely.
thank you all for watching.
Thank you.